Hello, this is Domenico with Easynomics, and this is part two of a series of videos tackling a paper two type question, but the content in this video can also be applied towards a paper one part B question that asks you to use a real world example, and it can also give you some insight in how to dissect articles for an internal assessment. In the information below this video, there are links to the following articles, which formed the basis of the paper two exam I wrote for my students in June of 2022. So if you want, you can go ahead and read those articles to get some context. This article looks at Saudi Arabia and its finance minister warning of a growing global food crisis caused by the Ukraine war, the disruption of exports of wheat in particular from Ukraine and Russia, reducing global supply, leading to higher wheat prices, food prices, and how that impacts the purchasing power of low-income households, mid-income households, and so on. Another article I used to develop the paper two is this one here. Russia-Ukraine crisis poses a serious food security threat to a particular nation, in this case, Egypt. And in this article, provide some data regarding Egypt's dependence on wheat imports. So here we can see that Ukraine provided about 3.54 million metric tons approximately to Egypt, whereas Russia provided about 8.25 million metric tons to Egypt. Again, we can see as a percentage here that Ukraine composes about 5% of total wheat imports to Egypt, Russia about 14%. So between them is about 20% of the total wheat imports going into Egypt is coming from Russia, Ukraine. And of course, with the war, if that is reduced, then it's going to have an impact on Egypt's wheat prices and any outputs made with the wheat, such as bread. Here, we can see the increase in the price of wheat over time as a result of the Ukraine war. This is the global wheat price, and in my third video, we will come back to this. And we can see how the disruption in the supply of wheat coming out of Ukraine and nations sanctioning Russia and refusing to buy Russian wheat exports, how that has led to a reduction in global supply and a dramatic increase in the price of wheat. We can see that perhaps prior to the Russo-Ukrainian war, we have wheat trading at about 290 US dollars per ton, and then it goes up to, let's see here, if I can capture that, 523 US dollars per ton. This last article, again, Russia's war is threatening the Middle East and North Africa. Food security, a concern this could lead to, in the long run, potentially riots, mass famine, mass migration. So, of course, this is an international concern, a concern for the EU, and so that was the focus of this paper. So this is the paper two that I wrote. Again, paper two for the new syllabus is an hour and 45 minutes, and you will choose one of two questions. So we're going to tackle the first question. And in my previous video, again, there'll be a link to that, I kind of went over the text from those articles that I included in my paper two. So I'm not going to go over that in detail. You can read through the articles that are linked below. And for this particular question, we're going to utilize text B, paragraph 6. And the question that we're going to tackle in this video is right here. We're going to look at question B double I here. And this is asking us, use an appropriate market supply diagram that illustrates the relationship between price and quantity supplied, and explain the dominant factors that determines the PES for wheat production. So we just need to illustrate what would the supply curve look like in terms of its elasticity and highlight the factor that's causing the PES to be either inelastic or elastic. So that's the question we're going to tackle. So here we go. So determinants of price elasticity of supply. Quick review. These may include length of time, mobility of the factors of production, how quickly can farmers transfer land, labor, capital from the production of, let's say, corn towards wheat, um, and so on. Spare capacity of firms. Do they have unused tools and resources that they can allocate towards production? The ability to store stock. Are these farmers storing some of their wheat and then can release it into the global market or not? Number 5, and the rate at which costs of production increase. It should be a quick thought that if you're thinking of any type of primary commodity, right, the first thing that you should be thinking of as an economics student or as an economist is the knowledge that with primary commodities, anything that is directly extracted from the land, we know, as I discussed in the previous video, that the PED is typically inelastic, has a value less than 1, and also the PES, the price elasticity of supply, is typically inelastic as well. Higher level students for the IB definitely need to know this. Primary commodities, you should know PED typically, if not always, low value. It will be inelastic for the price elasticity of demand and supply. So in this case, for supply, the dominant factor for primary commodities that's determining its elasticity is length of time. Right? This is typically the dominant factor. How long does it take for, in this case, a farmer to produce more wheat? And we know that to produce wheat, it takes time. You have to plant the seeds, wait for the grass to grow, and then harvest it. So this is probably the dominant factor that's prohibiting farmers worldwide from increasing their supply dramatically as price rises. We also notice that as we read the article, mobility of factors of production could also be a factor. In text B, paragraph 6, if I pull that up quickly, we go to that. It mentions here, right here, that water scarcity across the Middle East and North Africa means that local agricultural production is very limited. So it's difficult for farmers to mobilize a key factor production such as water. So that's also going to make the supply curve inelastic. Also here it mentions the rate at which costs of production increase. And if farmers are using gasoline for their machinery in the production of wheat, and if gasoline prices are rising, it makes it more difficult for farmers to employ gasoline as a resource to produce. So again, the supply curve is going to be inelastic. So just as a review, the formula for price elasticity of supply is that it's the change in the quantity supplied divided by the percent change in price. And if we have a value of PES less than 1, what that means is, let's say that the price elasticity of supply for wheat is equal to, let's say, 0.7. What that means is it's 0.7 over 1. So a 1% increase in the price of wheat would lead to only a 0.7% increase in the quantity supplied of that wheat. So it's not as responsive. Wheat prices are rising by a percent, but farmers can only increase the quantity supplied by 0.7. So that's what we mean. So the percent change in price is greater than the percent change in quantity supplied. I've explained this in previous videos. I'll perhaps have a link up here for that if you want to review, but that's the idea. So let's go ahead and illustrate and analyze what the supply curve would look like so that I can answer that particular paper 2 question. And it's simply an inelastic supply curve. So you're going to illustrate the supply curve being relatively inelastic. It's relatively vertical. So I'll label this S1 is equal to my marginal costs of production, and I'm going to illustrate a particular price, particular quantity. So perhaps I'll have price for wheat. Oh, let's see if I can just make that a straight line. Price of wheat here, and the quantity supplied here. I'll label for my exam P1, quantity Q1, and then I'll have the price increase to P2. And here we have the quantity supplied here at Q2. Here is P2. So we notice that the price for wheat is increasing and the quantity supplied is also increasing, but we see that the distance between Q1 and Q2 is less than the distance between P1 and P2. So I'm going to label this point A, label this point B. This is a movement along the supply curve. A change in price will lead to a change in the quantity according to the law of supply. And now I have my model to analyze, ready to be analyzed for paper 2. Again, in the article, we see here that the price has increased from approximately $292 per ton to $500 per ton. Okay. So my analysis for paper 2, as can be seen here in graph B, we're illustrating the market for wheat in the Middle East, North African region. We're measuring the price on the y-axis, the quantity on the x-axis. We have an upward sloping supply curve according to a law of supply. And we have a particular price set at P1 with a quantity supplied at Q1. Due to the Russo-Ukrainian war disrupting global supply, we see that the price of wheat is increasing from P1 to P2, leading to an increase in the quantity supplied from Q1 to Q2, which is a movement along the supply curve from point A to point B. We can see that the percent change in price is greater than the percent change in quantity supplied, meaning that farmers are not as responsive to a dramatic increase in price due to their inability to increase the quantity supplied as a result of, let's say, length of time. It takes time to plant seeds of wheat, for them to grow as grass, and to harvest them. Thus, it's not as responsive. So the PES for wheat, we would expect to be less than 1. In addition, within the text, talks about text B, paragraph 6, that there's a restriction on farmers from increasing their quantity supply due to the inability to mobilize a key factor of production, such as water. There is water scarcity in this region, and that's a key input in the production of wheat. So that would also contribute to the supply curve being relatively inelastic. All right, so that's it. That's how I would answer that question. And I'll post that question in the notes below the video. Here we've tackled question B, double I. In the next video, we'll tackle the second question, C. If you have any questions, feel free to comment, and don't forget to subscribe and to like. Thank you so much.